I'm a millennial, which is someone born from between the years of 1984 and 1996, if I understand. Well, that's what it was the last time I checked. It seems to change pretty much every week. When I was growing up, my generation were the first generation to have the internet in our childhoods. Although we are the last generation to have some life before the internet. The generation that is the first to grow up in the internet age is called Generation Z, who are the next generation along. But when I was growing up, we got the internet when I was about 10 or 11, I think. And all we ever used to hear was how privileged we were for having the internet, how previous generations never had it, how it was ruining us as people, how it's making us lack communication. So naturally you'd think that Generation Z would have this problem, being more inclined to use the internet. And maybe they do, but from what I've noticed, it seems as though suddenly, now that Generation Z are out and about in the working world, the internet's suddenly this marvellous thing. And millennials actually suck now because of that time where we didn't have the internet rather than the time that we did, which is really strange. And there's all this stuff online about how we should, basically give Generation Z privilege in the workplace, priority to jobs, and take away priority from millennials. So presumably they can be unemployed and we can all slag them off for being unemployed. But give the Generation Z priority for having internet skills, which previously millennials were supposed to be the internet obsessed generation. Also things like social media, like TikTok, which is, as far as I can see, it's an app where you can make yourself up to look like a celebrity or something, which sounds a bit gimmicky, but it's probably a fun app to use. But it's been spoken about like it's some revolutionary thing, because the idea is that most millennials are leftists, like far leftists. Not in my experience, but I don't know every millennial, so could very well be, who are triggered by perceived racism and sexism. And TikTok apparently allows you to do yourself up as a black person, which I think they call it digital blackface, which is a fucking stupid concept. I know that posting a gif of a black person, if you're white, a person of colour, is called digital blackface. But the idea is that TikTok is this revolutionary thing, and it's scaring the shit out of millennials. Millennials are crying under their bed because Generation Z are using TikTok. Because, we always have to portray our enemies as in an exaggerated tone. I certainly think leftists at Silicon Valley are probably a little bit nervous. But sites like MySpace, and I'm showing my age there, Facebook, Twitter, they have such terrible reputations now, and rightfully so. And YouTube as well, actually, with all the censorship and the data breaches. But you can't deny that these sites were multi-purpose. You can talk to people, you could share things. Memes, which used to be, just pictures with words on it, now that they're being used by Generation Z, they're again a big statement. But they got their start on sites like Facebook. Well, internet memes did. Compared to that, TikTok is just a site for you to put stuff on your face. But yeah, that's the one that's been seen as revolutionary. So there's this weird attitude towards millennials when it comes to technology. We're always named when the bad side of technology is discussed, but whenever it's the good side of technology, the advantages of technology, Generation Z, it's called a Generation Z thing, and it's palmed off as historic and revolutionary. One of the things I was always told growing up was that you should respect your elders because they have more life experience than you. There are probably some that will say Generation Z have more life experience than millennials. But one of the things that we should respect our elders for is that they created and built our phones for us that we use. They built the internet, which is completely true. You know, my generation didn't invent the internet. We used it quite a lot. But with the number of millennials now working in the tech industry, does that mean that Generation Z, who are, you know, this amazing generation because of the technology that they have, surely they should thank millennials, or at least the millennials that work in the tech industry? To be honest, I don't really have a problem with millennials. I don't really judge people by generations anyway. I've noticed that in the last few years, people have started to talk about the generations like they're independent nations, you know, like where they're an additional classification for us to have. You know, it's not just, you know, your race, your gender, your country of origin. It's now the decade that you were born in. But these arbitrary classifications, they seem to change every year. Once upon a time, you were a millennial if you were born in 1980 or all the way up to 2001, I think it was. Now it's been changed, presumably because some new evidence has come to light and that shows a division. Millennials and Generation Z both are technology obsessed, and probably some Generation Xers and baby boomers, but definitely those last two generations. But it's interesting how it's okay when it's one generation but not the other. I think there's actually been research that, my arm's aching by the way, I'm holding the camera up to the wall, that Generation Z can process information faster because of the internet, but they have a shorter attention span. And it's always, whenever it's always printed as, you know, they have a shorter attention span, but there's always an excuse because they are the generation that the media are trying to suck up to at the moment. But to me, that's pretty much a roundabout way of saying that millennials have a greater attention span than Generation Z. But you'll never hear that you'll never see that printed or hear that mentioned on the news. You'll hear the millennial generation have a worse attention span than Generation X. But you'll never hear us how we have a better attention span than Generation Z. It just wouldn't be printed. And if it did, attention spans would probably be declared wrong. You know, millennials suck because they have attention spans now. But like I said, I don't really have a problem with anyone from any generation. Just something I've observed which I thought was quite weird, and I hope I've put my points across clearly, because I'm very tired, so stammering a little bit. That's because I'm too used to technology. I don't have any social skills.